Hey Bookends, long time no see. Don't have a lot of time to talk because the book event I'm going to starts in about 10 minutes. You are in for a treat. I was invited to a little talk about Mayor Ras Baraka's new book, The Book of Baraka. If you don't know who he is, his family is famous for being activists in Newark, New Jersey, and he is the mayor of Newark, New Jersey. So this is going to be a delightful treat. I can't wait to go. I've already learned so many different things from listening to his audiobook, which is about an hour and 44 minutes. Hopefully they have an open Q&A session. If they do, I have questions because it was really interesting. But yeah, okay, come on. We're going now. Hey Bookends! I don't have a double chin, it's just my shirt. But we're inside. We're about to start soon to give you kind of a look at the stage. So yeah, cannot wait to see what the Mayor Ras Baraka has to say about his new book. Yay!
His cousin against the tree and him to one knee. And there's a small crevice in the sidewalk where his blood wouldn't wash away. Running from the voices, then whispers that turn hateful, too confusing to know what they say. Too many nightmares, no direction, and afraid of losing his fame. Trapped inside a ghetto tale, trying desperately to change. But in reality, it seems like things always stays the same. And he thought it was the weed that was keeping him sane. He tried to stay awake because he kept dreaming about flames. Now he was up to 4 blunts a day and 3 bottles of gin. Death in his thoughts until his mind would spin. He wanted to go out blazing, shooting against the wind, with dark blue tears and a peaceful grin. He tried to go the distance until the penitentiary became his hope. A 5 to 10 bid replaced his suicide notes. Hanging from the loose threads at the end of his own rope. Hey! You know the stories of the boy who never embraced his pain, whose memories are 2 blocks from that tree spot in the form of a blood stain, who dreamed of making millions, but instead died in the rain. Now the bricks hold his spirit, and his boys call his name. In the streets, scared and paranoid, knowing their fates is just the same. Yo, you know the story about the boy who had to do more with less? Met a ghost at 13 on one knee with his cousin in his arms as red rivers flowed from his chest. The dichotomy of my world made me feel like I needed to write poetry, to get it down, so I wasn't feeling like I was crazy. I used to hide my poetry in my back pocket and just try to fit in with everybody else. Tried to be as normal as everyone else was, even though what was happening in my household wasn't normal to them. When I write, I get into a space where I begin to see the world not as somebody trying to change it or fix it, but as somebody actually in it.
Good evening. My name is Jelani Cobb. Oh, I forgot I'm in Newark. Y'all are polite folk. You say good evening and people actually speak back. I came across the river. You say good evening over there. They're like, So my name is Jelani Cobb, and I'm a staff writer at the New Yorker. And I have the honor this evening of being in dialogue with your mayor, Ras Baraka. And I should add, also my classmate from Howard University. And we're going down the whole list. My brother from Alpha Phi Alpha also. And we also have with us the founder and chairman of Audible, Don Katz. And so I just want to jump right into it. You know, I get prouder and prouder of this project Each time, I hear even a little portion of it, and I was able to participate as the interviewer in the course of this conversation. So wondered if you could just talk, you and Don could both talk about how you met and how this project came to be.
Okay, I'll start with that. So, first of all, it's such an exciting pleasure to be here. I just want to do a quick call out to the NJPAC folks, Sean Schreiber and the team. They were involved in this production, and we work with them on so many other things. I also want to say, I was just thinking, listening to that amazing poetry, if you have to listen to this piece that he's done, that it's not a very usual thing in an urban environment to have a sitting mayor, a corporate guy, and a public intellectual talking about poetry and art. So, it was one of the great people who welcomed me to Newark years ago was Clem Price, who I miss every day. And he used to use the word cool, which a lot of people don't anymore, and he just talked about how cool things were, and I think it's a cool city, and a cool history, it's a cool place, and we got a cool mayor, so that's right. Anyway, so just to go back, it was 10 years ago at the museum, and I got off a stage, and I was approached by Ras Baraka, I heard of, and we immediately started talking about words, and I told him that I didn't get to see his father in the village when I moved there, but I certainly knew his poetry, and then we didn't talk about policy from the beginning, we talked about words and ideas, and that's what I remember from that night.
Yeah. So I remember coming to a very stuffy kind of event at the museum, and this white guy was on stage talking about the city of Newark and a whole bunch of other things, and and I was actually listening to it, I was like, wow. I mean, he was saying some stuff that I thought the folks in the audience were getting a little uneasy about. So I have to introduce myself to this guy. And we did, and we started talking, and I told him our speech was great, and we began, as you said, talking about spoken word and words and all of this other kind of stuff, and I think we've been in touch and friends since then, so absolutely.
It should be said, though, that I gave a couple other speeches where he was there, and afterwards he said, "You're beginning to sound like a Baptist minister." I knew he wasn't talking about the good part of it. He was talking about the you can't get off a point part of it.
It's only bad if you pass around a collection plate, and kind of goes into this project, which is that when we were coming up, we were all playing the dozens. We would say all kind of stuff about people. I remember one time I had this Hostess cupcake, and I was holding it, and you ran up and slapped it out of my hand.
You gotta be careful, sir. I'm the mayor, and this is city.
I'm just still saying, in my heart, I still feel a way about that cupcake. Like it's missing. But we would talk bad about each other. We would talk bad. We would say anything. We would play the dozens. We say anything. But I remember about you that you would never let anyone say a wrong word about the city of Newark. You didn't play with that. And I'm not saying that as a political thing. This is a person who loves the city so much. That's just who Ras Baraka is. It was this is my place. This is where we're from. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about your ancestral connection to the city of Newark and how that informs, because this is your story, but it also starts before you were born. And so tell me a little bit about the Barakas of Newark.
Well, first, Newark, if you live here, if you've grown up here, if you're a part of this city, at the end of the day, we've always been people talk about us in a very negative way all the time, and especially when I was a kid. Growing up, in the 80s and 90s, it was rough times. And when people say Newark, they never said anything positive. And we became very defensive, very insular, had a little foxhole mentality even, we was going after anybody who said anything wrong about us. And we were going to prove everybody wrong. I think we still have that edge today, that we're going to prove everybody wrong. We're going to be the best at it. We're going to go the hardest. We're going to rise to the top to prove people that they're just dead wrong. And that's what I love so much about this place, the perseverance, the families, the the way we stick together, you know, when, you know, like a family, we might fight and fuss with each other, but don't say nothing about my mama, you know what I mean? The same kind of thing. But you know, my family, like most families, you know, most African American families ventured up here from the South, you know, in the second migration, you know, like the warmth of other suns, like the book, you know, we made our way here. And, you know, both of my mother and father from the Carolinas, you know, they came here. It's a joke that they say, you know, it was on a train and the conductor says, you in Newark? And they said they thought it was New York. And we've been here ever since. Yeah, you know, my mother's family was more working class, you know, kind of family. The mother in the textile industry, you know, truck driver, all in that kind of, you know, my father's family was more society kind of folks. And society in those days was like, you know, post office and social worker, you know.
That's middle class status.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. For black folks, you know, they were black doctors who were train conductors because, you know, they couldn't get work. So the Pullman car porters was the prestigious thing for us at that time. So yeah, you know, just in the city. And my father and mother obviously grew up here in, you know, in this town and became embedded in the culture here and fought hard to change and transform themselves and what was going on in the city and the world. They just did it from the front porch of the city of Newark. And, you know, I think all of that has stayed with me and affected me and probably my brothers and sisters and, you know, many, many people in this town.
Don, could you talk to me a little bit about this too? Because you have a very particular relationship to the city of Newark and a very particular investment in the city of Newark. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that in terms of how Audible came to be here, what Audible is doing in the city.
Sure. So I was born on the south side of Chicago, and I came of age a generation before you guys, and I was very much formed by a full understanding of what the urban black experience was, including when I was a kid, the city of Chicago was gunning down black people at night, who actually I served breakfast with, and it was you know, it was a very formative experience. I became really focused on urban inequality as a kid, so it just happened to be at a time of one of those junctures, in the same way that you guys were clearly reading and understanding during the Reagan era what was happening to the urban core and taking that in. It was just a different era. So, you know, I started out as a writer. I was a writer for 20 years. And, you know, I wasn't an activist like Ras became in the sense of being on the street. I wrote about police violence. I wrote about, you know, the wars of liberation. And then I wrote for a living for 20 years. And then when I started Audible, I also figured out that there was a way when it became successful to have potentially an impact on this consistency of inequality and its, you know, structural history. So all I could think to do in 2007 was to move here and move the headquarters here. We didn't take any incentives, which is a big deal in this state in particular. We didn't even know there was a payroll tax, which is it was a payment system, and so we just came in and we wanted to see if there was a way to make a difference. And you know, it's a longer story, and there's lots of people in this audience who are very, you know, connected. But we started out by just saying no more nepotistic internships. If you're going to be a paid intern, and you have to be a kid educated or from Newark. And at that point, you know, our lives. I just got the pleasure of meeting the new class, you know, backstage. But at that point, I just said, wait a minute, this is fantastic. We've got, you know, we're becoming the largest employer of actors in the New York area. We got all these old English majors like me turned into suits, and then you got you know, these incredible technologists from all over the world, and then these incredible kids, you know, from the K-12 environment in Newark, and from there we just iterated on all kinds of different ideas. And most of it was based on this idea of what the mayor and I talked about over the years, the multiplier effect. Like, what can you do that has multiple kind of outputs, and not just, because what and Ras, I'd love to know if you kind of agree. I mean, what happened over the years is more focus on the outcomes of racism and inequality than the core of the beginning of it. And so, we started Newark Venture Partners, for instance, and the idea was to build lots of little audibles, then bring back all the talent of the K-12 and Rutgers Newark, which is a machine for incredible human beings. We're first generation. I don't know if Nancy's here, but and then the idea was you create a lot of these cool companies, the revenue goes up, the city has more money, but we even bring in companies that, like really sophisticated mental health companies that speak to the to the underserved community and things like that. So there's just all these ideas that we've tried to, just be a different kind of company.
Yeah, I think that's commendable. And in the work that I do, I was just like this week when I was talking to people, and it was like, oh, why don't we have more black journalists? And I was like, well, part of it is people can't afford to take unpaid internships. And they say the people who you hire the interns and they move up through the ladder, but if you can't afford to do the internship, then you don't ever get into that pipeline. And so I think that's crucial. I think of all the things you said that are so commendable, the thing that stood out to me was the idea of paying interns, because you literally help these young people get an avenue into the rest of their lives.
Yeah. But the main thing is the people in this city, the families in this city, it's just right out of Content of Character, Martin Luther King. It's just it's an incredible city filled with some of the greatest people I've ever met. So it's just it's always about the people, and so that's a real connection. And then the fact that there's so much culture here that was transformative and creative, and now we have this amazing piece. Which incidentally, if you got to listen to this piece, I mean, this is a really profound piece about history, about a coming of age, about families, about fathers and sons, about so many things. It's not I'll tell you, I think it could be the beginning of a new political memoir voice. I was telling Ras and Jelani this. Just the same way we've done with our words and music programs and stuff, where people realize that there's a way of expressing this in a really deeply intimate way. And because I'll tell you that nothing has sold less than books by politicians in the last 50 years, except for anything by Barack Obama. And so, this is, I'm really excited. But you will, even all these people who know Ras Baraka really well, and I think Jelani would agree, you're going to hear a different kind of voice, a syncopation, a depth that you just don't usually get when whatever angle you know him from.
Ras, I want to talk to you as an artist, and I want to talk to you as a leader. And I think that there's this moment that I think gets at so much of that, which is when you had won the election, you were going to be the mayor, and you had this whole series or confluence of thoughts that were going through your mind about the city. You said, when I become mayor, you become mayor, we become mayor, and also your father. And you talked about what you thought about, everything going through your head at that moment. And I thought it was one of the most insightful parts of the project. I wonder if you could just take us back there for a second.
Yeah. So the whole, when I become mayor, we became mayor, this came out of a speech very organically, and just talking about really that I'm from Newark. I'm the kid from Avon and 14th. I went to Madison Avenue School. I'm the boy that you see, up and down the street. Like, so when I'm the mayor, you're the mayor. Like, so it also means that you have to now hold the weight of helping transform the city, that you have a role and responsibility in it. It's not, a sideline sport, right? That you have to be, it's a participatory sport. You've got to be involved in it. And that's really what it means, more than anything. Running for office and winning is two different feelings, It's like wanting to change something, but then being given the resources to actually do it, right? Building something and saying you want to build it is two different things, right? And so all of that stuff hit you at one time. My father wasn't there. You know, he passed away a couple of months before that in the hospital. You know, passing out literature in the hospital. You know, while he was in the bed telling the doctors and the nurses, my son's running for mayor. Probably lived God knows where. Like, great, but I can't vote for him. You know, but you know, he did that, and he didn't get a chance to see me inaugurated. You know, and you know, so all of that was going through my head while I was riding. You know, that day the helicopter came down on my block. I didn't know what it was there for. You know, I thought something was going on. I came on the porch. I mean, my neighbors were standing on the porches. I mean, it was a helicopter hovering real low, and I think it was that's for you. You know, I got in the car, listened to Nina Simone, and on my headphones, and trying to hold back tears. And you know, it was this part when I got out, I had to get him. They stopped the car in front of City Hall, and there's some cops there. You got to get out and do the salute. It's all this stuff. I never knew none of this stuff was a part of anything. So you get out, you have to salute people. It was just really, really emotional for me because it just felt like all of the things that we've done and have been working for and fighting for is culminating now, and like you really have to do something now, and you know, people will look at you a little differently. You know, because it's easier sometimes to be on the side saying, we want justice, we want freedom, but being the person that has to really deliver that is something different, right? That's a whole different thing, and the burden is heavy, right? So you carrying that and getting used to that, putting that suit on was a different kind of thing for me, from being an activist to an elected official, you know. And some part of me, I thought it never was going to happen, because I was used to losing. You know, and it did.
But I want to ask you about that too, because you know, both are thinking about this in the long term. You know, you being elected mayor and your father and mother, your family being integral to the first black mayor being elected in the city of Newark in the first place, and then opening a door that, unbeknownst to them at the time, you know, their 3-year-old son was going to walk through years later. Which I think is kind of like speaking to the span of history.
God is good. My father was beaten in the head in the Newark Rebellion by a guy who went to high school with.
Yeah. Who was a cop.
Who was a cop, yeah. Who pulled him over and hit him over the head. And I mean, just that trail of history and all of the stuff that came with that his son becomes the mayor, is the greatest trick, right? That could be pulled on these folks. Like, now take this. You know? So, yeah, it's really poetic that happened, and you know, what we do with it and what we're able to leave behind will, you know, speak to what it actually meant.
You know, there was something else that you said when we were talking. You know, in the interviews for this project, that really jumped out at me, which is that you talked about you were used to losing, but you said that by that point, by the time at which you won, people didn't know that your ability to lose was like a secret weapon. You know, and that really was profound to me. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about what that meant, you know, and how you were able to utilize those, was it 16 years?
Yeah, 16 years.
Yeah, 16 years in which you had not won elections, and how that actually became a virtue.
Well, because you're not afraid to lose anymore, you know, and you're willing to take risk. It doesn't hurt the third time as much as it did the first time, right? And you get closer and closer to it. So losing actually teaches you how to win, and that's important, you know, especially for young people to know that falling down is a part of like success. Like, how can you get back up if you never fall down? Like, and you have to go through something, right? And I tell like young people all the time, it's best to take the stairs. The elevator might get you there faster, but it won't keep you there longer, right? It's best to just take the stairs, go through everything you need to go through, and then you appreciate being there right? And you have more. It has more value to you. So losing, as long as it doesn't become like a habit, you know what I'm saying? But it's a part of a journey, like a walk, and that's what it was for me.
But we shouldn't discount how impressively this man pivoted into being a manager, leader, CEO, whatever you want to call that. I mean, I was on a small group under deep NDAs, I guess I'm not supposed to talk about it, but to try to help find talent. And his sense of the accountability that was needed. Look what has happened to criminal justice in the city under the mayor. It took a lot of changes, and that's not easy to do. And so it's a lot of people who are good at running or good at being, even said, provocateurs in the piece, don't pivot to what it takes to be an administrative, head of a city. And it's hard.
I think that brought to mind something too, Don, where this project is important. I wanted to know what the appeal of this project was to you at the outset, but also it fits into a bigger category of Newark voices that you've cultivated through Audible. I wonder if you could talk about both of those.
Absolutely. So, this is so dear to my heart. This idea of profound storytelling, and I just knew the mayor had these kind of stories inside of it, just knowing him. But I think my mentor teacher was Ralph Ellison. So I came at Audible knowing that it was about this profound power of oral storytelling, and that was kind of the idea of Audible from the beginning. And I knew that actually the American literature is a function of how Americans talked in the early days. The polyglot storytelling, the lamenting in the fields, the Yankee peddlers. We wrote like Americans because of the way we talk. I got all that from Ralph Ellison. So there's actually, any chance I get, I give him an ode, because both my careers as a writer and Audible definitely came from his sensibility of spiritual guidance. So we knew when we got better at this that the next stage for Audible would be to write and perform to this intimate aesthetic that literally millions and millions of people can access at any time of the day around the world. And when we went into that, it was clearly, why wouldn't we, tap into the great voices of the city that we've adopted and consider our home. There's, people in this audience with huge talent. I think Mickey Taylor's here and Chisa Hutchinson. I think you're there. We just have, we have Audible Theater. We have all these different kind of venues where people can talk. We're working with George Clinton now. I mean, there's if you actually get to go to Audible, and gosh, we miss our 3 buildings, and we just
got it. Funkadelic George Clinton?
Yeah.
Oh wait, that was like you said George. I was like, you said George Clinton. For whatever reason, I was thinking Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. And I was like, George Clinton. Oh wait, that's important.
George Clinton.
We need to know what he thinks.
The Funkmaster, absolutely. I'm listening to something now by Yvonne Durant, who works with us. Just profound, good piece. There's so many ways to tell great stories, and just all about capturing it. So the more we can make that, and working with NJPAC and producing more and more of these things. I should say that NJPAC put on Jazz in the Key of Ellison, which with Wynton Marsalis and Joe Morton and others, which was another fantastic Newark event. And there's actually a reprise of it happening in Philadelphia, and hopefully it gets it gets recorded. But anyway, Audible is at this point just it's way beyond anything I could have imagined in terms of its scale. But this idea of profound creativity and primary creativity by bringing the best directors, producers, dramaturgs together to draw out the stories and then make them have this kind of intimate. I mean, when that snare and the syncopation comes under Ras's, there's like soliloquies. They really are, and they're like there's a reason people love that stuff, because it's profound. It's writing and performance at the highest level. So I couldn't be prouder of that, and all the other originals we're doing.
So Raz, one of the things that surprised me, even as long as I've known you, was your relationship to art. Your art specifically, which obviously you come from, this very arts-oriented family, but you literally hid your own work, and kept secret, the fact that you wrote poetry, and the function of that poetry in your life. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how that factored in your coming of age and growing up and maturing as a young person, and the role for you now, the second part of that, the role that poetry has in your life now as a leader of this important city.
Yeah, I think the poetry still has the same kind of role ultimately for me. Like, even when I hit it, it was necessary for me to get out the things that I wanted to get out, to say the things I wanted to say, the things that I was feeling that I thought I couldn't talk to anybody else about, the images that were in my head and my heart. And the poetry we were learning in school was not what I was used to hearing, right? The poetry they call classical poetry was not the poetry I was used to hearing in my house. Sonia Sanchez and Linton Kwesi Johnson and my father and all these people getting up reading poetry, going to poetry events did not sound like the poetry we had to memorize in school.
No, wherefore, henceforth.
Yeah, it wasn't Jeffrey Chaucer or anything.
Right, Chaucer.
Yeah, so, but it was.
Thou art.
Yeah, I think, American education, my father used to say they forgot the English lost the war. That's why at the end of the day, so that I didn't think it was comfortable to read in school. Like, we didn't have poetry readings in school back then for kids and get up and read your poetry in class. And, when I hung out either on 11th Street or Avon and 14th, if I couldn't pull poetry out and be like, yo, y'all want to hear this poem? It might have been a short stay up there in front of Yusef Steak and Tape. So, I just kept it in my pocket, and loose pieces of paper, notebooks. We didn't have iPads and all those things, so I had to write it on pieces of paper and stick it in my pocket, in my coat pocket, everywhere else. I still got this bag and envelope where I had a whole bunch of poetry stuck in there for God knows how long. And that's what it did for me. I used to slip down from Avon and 14th to 17th. There's a church there, was a band, and I used to sit on the church steps sometimes, think about it, write some stuff here and there. But eventually, when I got to college, that's when Howard University, just introduced me to myself. They just the forums, the events, the poetry, people thought like me, felt like me, expressed things that I wanted to express, and I just fell in love with the place and the people, and it just expedited me. Whatever I was feeling or thinking, it just went there. And when I came back home, obviously I kept writing because I couldn't help myself, and I still write from time to time. I get myself in that space that I have to write. I go to my office now and play some music if I can and write downtown. At City Hall, there's probably poetry on the files in there too. But I write because I have to. It keeps me sane, keeps me level, keeps me clear, reminds me of why we're doing this in the first place. And my father said to me before he left out of this place, don't lose your poetry license. Which reminds me that I have to keep writing, no matter what, because that's the essence of who you are. Like, you're really a writer. In the middle of all this stuff, you're a poet, an artist. Like, you're the mayor, a principal, a teacher, but at the base of that, you're an artist, a writer.
So, I kept in touch with Dean Keene from Howard. You know what I'm about to say. Dean Keene said that the group that came in your year, he had been there for 25 years, was the worst group. So in his entire academic career, that class that came in that year was the worst group of unruly hooligans he had ever encountered on the sacred campus of Howard University. But in very short order, a lot of that disruptiveness was channeled into something very different. And I remember when I first got there, because I came in a year after you, and everybody was like, "Oh, yeah, it's Ras, don't hang out with them, they wild."
We gotta put this guy out, man. That's what he is. But
he knows too much.
I know too much. Ras knows a lot of stuff about me too. Thankfully, fortunately, he's more discreet than I am. But I wonder if you could talk about that. You said that Howard introduced you to yourself and the journey you took from your first year, when you said you were actively avoiding the kind of political commitments and engagements that had been so much part of your familial background, into the end where you were leaving Howard and trying to figure out what it is that you'll contribute to your city of Newark when you come back.
yeah, I mean, even in high school, I was trying to be like everybody else, trying to fit into what was going on in the school, and that's why I always, I tell young people today, like, do your thing, you don't have to be with these people all the time, like, walk away from them, you need time for yourself to figure it out, like, and it's okay, like, take a Thursday or a Tuesday, some off day, like, you go to the mall with them every day, tell them no today, like, no, I'm not going, I'm going home, like, I gotta be by myself or something. When I grew up, I was trying to, be what everybody else was. My name was different. We believed different things. We didn't celebrate the same things. We grew up in a different kind of motif. It was different and people, don't really understand that. It's different today. We're more accepting of all of this stuff than we were in the 70s and 80s. Back then, having your name, Ras Baraka, was strange to people. My brother got in fights because of it, and a bunch of other things. He was a lot more aggressive than me. OB, So it just was a different time. And then you have people who targeted you because they didn't like your father or his politics or stuff like that. People in class and other folks like you come across, and you get the reverse of that. You get people who love you and try to do this and expect you to do different things, and then you have the reverse of that, which is people who like taunt you. Mm-hmm. When I got to college, I just, I fell in love with Howard immediately, man. I just tried to hang out with everybody else that was like me, folks from New Jersey, New York, Philadelphia, just the city folks, and like you said, we were just having a good time. Our freshman year, and I really didn't think a lot about all of the stuff that that I actually learned growing up. Mm-hmm. And at Howard, there was a group called Black United Youth, and they would have these meetings, and I was always drawn to the stuff that they were studying and doing, and I finally started getting into that, mm-hmm. and listening and being a part of the things, and I just said, this is where I'm supposed to be. Mm-hmm. I'm supposed to be doing this stuff. I'm supposed to, there's a plan for me somewhere, mm-hmm. and I ran into people just like me.
Mm-hmm. But when you listen to the piece, which is so beautifully edited and pulled together, you really see an intellectual and a politicization passage that's set in time, because what was going on in the 80s, different from my experience of the Vietnam War and the assassinations and the things, it was, people forget. I mean, first of all, it was just, what the Reagan administration was trying to do. We kind of erased memory pretty easily in the United States, but, it was right up there with what, the last president was up to. And you could sort of see that this generation was being, educated in counterpoint to that, awful narrative.
It's also the line that you have, the side that you choose, because not everybody at Howard was like, consumed into all of that. It was very apathetic, which is the reason why we were organized in the first place.
The fashion shows.
Yeah, because look, I mean, you got one side of it, and there were people who were traveling to South Africa to be a part of the anti-apartheid movement. Ona Austin and Yvonne Moore, who was the president, vice president of student government. Then you had protests on the campus against what was going on. You had protests about, like what you're saying, all the issues that were happening because of the Reagan era and all of the craziness that was going on in New York City with police brutality and all of that stuff. It was just, everybody who I was attracted to was beginning to organize themselves and be in organizations and move forward, and was excited about what was happening. And we thought we should form an organization to get everybody to move like we were moving. I would get up in the yard at 12 o'clock in the afternoon and stand on the wall at Howard University when it was packed out there and start giving a speech right there. Boom. That's what I mean to introduce me to myself. I would have never done that in Newark, New Jersey at 16 years old. You know what I'm saying? I jumped on the wall and was in it. You know, at 17 years old, bah, 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 you know? And yeah, it gave me the courage and conviction to go forward with this.
But it's funny too, because like, you know, the important thing I think we got from that was that we were all doing that for each other. Because, and here's something literally I've never said to you in private, but I'll tell you like now. But it's not like that. We were in Douglas Hall one time, and we were coming out of a meeting. We had all this like mandatory reading we were supposed to do in the study group, and I read all of this stuff, and I was thinking about all of this stuff. And we walked out, and we were going down the corridor, and you slapped me on the back and said, "My man Jelani is a scholar." That was the first time anyone ever called me that. And so when I got my PhD, a lot of people called me that.
Yeah.
But you called me that before all of that, so you recognize that. And I think that that's important when we're talking about what goes into leadership. And to the point about you saying you knew how to lose, the reason I think that was so important and why I wanted to come back to that was that we live in a world where people lose when they should have won. And people lose again and again and again. And they can be led to believe that something is wrong with them.
That's right. That's right.
But something's wrong with the referee.
That's right.
Something's wrong with the game. Something's wrong with the game. And so to be able to have a testament, as you were saying in this project, it was saying, you know, I understood how to lose. I figured that out, and that became like my advantage, which is one of the things I thought was like, wow, that's really, we need to like make sure that people hear that.
The funny thing, I was telling the students backstage that you was always the smartest cat on the campus. I always thought that, but at the end of the day, you know, I just thought we were empowering each other, like that, and that's the best thing that Howard did for me, and I think it still does that for so many kids. Like it just puts you in a space where you feel like, you know, you're just incredible, and you have to do something. Like you have all this stuff now. When you go home, you just have to make something happen, and I think that's what goes on. You know, that's why a lot of us are all over the place doing all these things, because just the nurturing that you just don't get anywhere else, and the expectation for you to be successful is just there.
You know, one of the things in the piece which was, I thought, painfully eloquent was an 80s phenomenon, which was the rise of drugs and the way you treat that and what it did to Newark. And I think, again, people sometimes think that could have been a constant, but it actually was almost an injected reality that, of course, hit poor people. But I don't know if you want to talk about that, but I thought that part of the piece was very insightful, the way it hit Newark and the way it hit the neighborhoods.
Crack to the 80s was like heroin in the 70s.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I mean, look, you saw whole neighborhoods change. People, your friends, everybody just changed instantly. And then the level of violence and all of the things that came with it just transformed everything. Music, movies, people, just had a deep impact on people's lives. And you saw people you grew up with, you know, lose their life, either to the street in terms of death or go to jail. And you haven't seen them until 15, 20 years later. Right? These are the things that were happening as we were growing up, as the backdrop of what was happening. And all of those kids who came to Howard at that time, a lot of them came out of that. That's why Dean King was saying that. All of them came from that and escape, you know, and really, you know, couldn't, because that stuff is traumatizing. We already traumatized, and, you know, that's like doubly traumatizing to be in that space. You know, your friends are dying, people going to jail, the drugs, the guns, all this stuff that was happening so fast, you know, and you can't leave it home because it's with you.
Right.
So I'm a journalist that comes out. I was wondering this for a while. You unbelievably led this city through this incredible COVID crisis, and we saw how inequitably, once again, it hammered the more disadvantaged parts of the society versus others. Did you ever think about your understanding and experience of how drugs inequitably hit a city like Newark and how COVID inequitably, did you ever compare and contrast, or is that just something I made up?
Yeah, you probably made that up. No, but this, I don't know if anybody could be prepared for what's happening. Nobody, there's nothing that you really could have done to get yourself ready for what we're going through at this point. This is like something out of a dystopian novel. This is wild stuff. And having to hear about it every day, all day, in meetings and the deaths and everything that was associated with it. I don't think people were prepared. And really, whoever you were was going to be escalated in the middle of this thing, right? So whatever is in you is coming out, right? And it's going to raise itself because it's necessary at this point. That's why every ill in the society has, been, just come to the forefront, because this thing did that. And, we really didn't have any choice. We did what we had to do to protect ourselves and our families. And, I tried to make decisions that were useful, and based on something that was real and material, and tell people what I heard. As a writer, I think that's what that inspires you to do that. Like, I'm hearing this and I have to tell everybody else what's going on, so they at least have some inkling of why we're making these decisions. And everybody still don't like it, but at the end of the day, it's more people are alive because of it.
So we're just about out of time. I should remind you all that there is a reception that will follow this. And time has just kind of flown by. And I want to end with one question, which is, we talked for like six and a half hours or something like that in the course of this. And a lot of this was difficult. You went through difficult points. You talked about the loss of your sister, which I know was immensely painful to you. Your personal ups and downs, difficulties, and you conveyed this whole narrative honestly and candidly. What are you hoping people will take from your story?
Well, first you made it easy for me to be able to do that. I don't know if I could have done it with anybody else because I was comfortable. I know you, I trust you. So it was like we were having conversations like in Drew Hall or something, or Douglas 116, So it was easy for me to do that. And it's really what it is. I want people to see the humanity in who I am, and just motion is the only constant thing. That we're always moving, and we're always changing and developing. And the place you start off is not the place you're gonna finish. And don't allow your location to dictate your destination. And all of the things that I went through and the things that I believed and the upbringing in the city, I'm just like everybody else. I'm just a regular person like everybody else who happened to become the mayor of the city. And that's really what it is, more than anything else.
I just want to thank you for that story about Shawnee and the way you tell it. It's going to mean a lot to so many people. And I didn't fully understand, what had happened. And, the irony of a person that amazing, and the fact of that level of violence. It's just, I think it's something that you kind of have to hear. So anyway, I just want to thank you for sharing, because it's powerful.
I think the last thing I'll say about this is that I really think that we need more leadership that unabashedly loves the communities that they lead. And this city is fortunate to never have had to question that about you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Appreciate it, man.
It's incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming out to the reception of my father.
Must be a black woman, you know. When I was younger, every time I got on my knees, my mama showed up. Every time I got on my knees, my mama showed up. I swear every time I got on my knees, it was my mama's face that came to me in complete stillness. It was my mama that made all the miracles happen in my house. She saved lives for a living, breathed air in our lungs, raised 4 black boys in a world that tried to suffocate them. Hail mama, full of grace, blessed are ye amongst women. It was that preacher that lied, took you out of the trinity of things and made you a ghost. Tried to make me afraid of your image. Hail mama, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our rebirth. Move the stone from the cave of our minds and resurrect us. Help us recall the taste of ebony and the black of the womb, the darkness and triple stages like kissing the midnight sky, giving birth to a miracle. She wears the color of eternity on her face. Ageless but as old as time itself, she carries civilization on her back. The trees weep when she walks, the wind envies her, yet she cries oceans of tears for her children are persecuted. Hail mama, blessed is the fruit of thy womb. The world has turned its back on you. Do you know her name, your mother, your sister, your wife? I saw her at a block party on Elizabeth and Mika. She sat there and everyone passed, looked, and some even spoke, and if you were lucky, she smiled at you. She would look your way for just a split second and you would fall in love with her high cheekbones, the music in her voice, the tone in her eyes, the curve in her lips, the way she holds her head. She washes other people's clothes to put her kids through college. She taught other people's children and cleaned other people's homes. She tilled their storios and worked their factories. She kept our families together. She saves lives for a living. Yeah, God must be a black woman. 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 Every time I got on my knees, my mama showed up. God must be a black woman. Who else could have done all of this anyway? Hail, Holy Queen, Mother of Mercy. Hail our life, our sweetness, our hope. Hail, black woman, the Madonna, the life giver. The world has wronged you.
Hey, Bookends. So it is over. I'll talk more in the car, but that was awesome. Okay. Hey, Bookends. Getting this mask off. My glasses are all fogged up. Masks are important. So I'm not mad, but yeah. So that was awesome. Yeah. So to give you some context for me personally, for my family, like my dad knows the Barakas as activists because they were growing up, you know, my dad grew up around the same time, so they were activists. My older brothers, because there's a substantial difference, age difference between my brothers and I, know Ras Baraka himself as a principal. They didn't go to whatever school that he taught at, but that's what was it Central, West Side? I forget what school he taught at, but that's how my brothers know him. I personally only know him as the mayor. So it's interesting how this one human's family in Newark went through these different iterations. I don't know Ras Baraka as an activist. I don't know his father or mother as an activist. I don't know them at all. When he was elected, one of my brothers was like, it's just the principal. You know, so to him, you know, it wasn't really that big. It was kind of a big deal, but it wasn't. He didn't really see Ras Baraka as a politician. He more so saw him as, it's just the principal. And for my dad, it was like, wow, we're going someplace, I guess. So yeah, that was awesome. I'll talk more about the book and a book review later. Bye, guys. Or should I say, bye, Bookends.